Hello, hello, welcome. Hi. Good evening and welcome to this AZ night, the first AZ night of 2018. There might be some people coming in still, so I would advise you to come a little bit closer to the center. So people sitting on the edges, you can surely move a little bit closer together. Thank you. There is one person moving. So this is already the fifth night, the fifth AZ night in the series. And these AZ nights are meetups for makers, thinkers, and students of the creative industry. They meet with different speakers with a specific expertise or artistic practice to talk about a chosen theme. And the theme is always chosen because we think it could spark an interesting discussion to broaden our perspective and that it can inspire our practice in the arts. We already discussed the future of education, different perspectives on engagement, the art of presenting, the relation between art and money, and how to organize yourself. And tonight's theme is Dark Ecology, artistic encounters in the Anthropocene. And this could actually be the darkest edition so far. And so far, or maybe even the darkest edition in the series of AZ Nights, period. And here we are, thanks to Z33, Architectuurwijzer, PXL Meid School of Arts, Lucas School of Arts, Campus C-Mine, U Hasselt Faculty of Architecture and Art, in a joint effort, and they make these evenings possible. My name is Katharina Smets. I'm an independent radio producer, and I'm also a PhD researcher in the arts of narrative audio, which is short for making podcasts and performative narrative pieces. Well, I have been quite concerned with the environment since I was a child. I was always wearing a WWF t-shirt, WWF t-shirt with seals on it. And I also was a big fan of Seabird. I don't know if anybody knows Seabird. Yes, thank you. Generation. Yes, but still now I'm quite concerned of eating locally. I'm a very, very lazy vegetarian for several years. I always feel quite guilty when I buy a new iPhone. I feel even guiltier when I take the plane. But I'm wondering is all this guilt and anxiousness, is it actually, worthwhile? Or even, was it actually quite true, this anxiousness? And is there any hope? Well, but before we start, we all got a test tube. I think Kristof has a few test tubes more. You all got a test tube, yes? You haven't opened it yet. Quite important, because there is a slight surprise connected with it. So it would be, so keep it closed. So far, we will tell you in time when to open it. Please don't drink it yet. The consequences could be quite bad. Not that I haven't warned you so far. So don't take any risks. So we will finish tonight at 9:45, more or less. And there will be 2 talks. And in the beginning and after, there will be a Q&A. You will have the chance to ask your questions. This evening will be in English because one of our speakers is American. And if you don't understand anything, please raise your hand, ask your question. We would be happy to explain a little bit further. We will finish this evening with a performance that I hope will bring us some hope, hopefully. Welcome. Have a seat. So tonight we will talk about something that is often considered a controversial theme. Like I said, this AZ night might be quite dark. You might not notice, but we actually live in an Anthropocene right now. It is the age in which humanity became the prevailing force. Nature is no longer shaping humanity, but we are shaping the world. So the term Anthropocene is proposed as a name for a geological period in which humans have become the major force. And the word Anthropocene contains a big story in itself. Living arrangements that took millions of years to put into place are being undone in the blink of an eye. Some scientists argue that the rate of biological extinction is now several hundred times beyond its historical levels. We might lose a majority of all species by the end of the 21st century. When I read this, I don't know, if this is true, this is quite shocking. There is a massive increase in carbon dioxide, nothing surprising there. Methane and nitrate emissions into the atmosphere. There is industrialized agriculture, of course, to blame for that. Mineral extraction, petroleum-driven production, and globalized shipping transportation networks. And they all outplaced all other natural rhythms of life. In other words, we are ruining the earth. And everything on it. And the question is it reversible? What can we do about it? Scientists, writers, artists are in a state of shock. Perhaps, yes, the artist says yes. But how can we do something about this total ruination of the earth? The term Anthropocene has been and is hyped and discussed, but one thing is sure, it is here and it won't go away. So, we practitioners in the arts, how can we relate to this concept in a constructive way? And are there any new possibilities? Is there any hope? I really hope so. So, but to enlighten us, we have invited Kristof Vrancken, Spaid, and Kris Verdonck, and the musician Innerwoud. To begin with Kristof Vrancken, this AZ Night theme is actually inspired by the doctoral research, The Sustainist Gaze, by this photographer, Kristof. Can you join us? He's a person who gave you the test tube in the beginning of the evening. And together with Kristof, we invited philosopher and curator Spaid. She curates exhibitions in which she presents works of ecologists, designers and scientists who think about and try to solve ecological problems, amongst other things. And also, together with Kristof, we invited multi-talented artist Kris Verdonck. For many years now, Kris is fascinated by the relationship between the human and the machine. And he shows his research in performances, in architecture, in dance, in installations. And because this theme is so hard and complex, we try to bring a little moment of peace then in the end with Innerwoud. But yeah, Kristof, maybe you can have a seat because we will start this evening with a little game. Or no, maybe you can be my little assistant. Sorry. Oh, yes. Okay. So before we start off talking why you actually chose this theme for this evening, I have a list of questions. And it's a list of questions for the audience. It's a little test. It's not really super complicated. You just have to raise your hand. It's not super scary, maybe a little bit confrontational. Are you ready, Kristof?
I'm ready.
Yes. Who is attending an AZ night for the first time tonight? Okay, that's quite easy. Who is a maker? Okay. Who's a thinker? Kris is not a thinker. Who heard the term Anthropocene for the first time? Okay. Who loves taking long showers? Who recycles their waste? Yeah, me too. Who buys second-hand clothes? Yeah, I mean, not really. Who thinks we should stop buying stuff? Yeah. Who is vegetarian because of eco-critical reasons? Oh, not so many. Who worries about climate change? I think almost everybody, right? Who loves taking a bath every day? Ooh, cool. Yeah. Who thinks Trump is right and climate change is a hoax? Oh, there is somebody? No, oh, it was a joke. Who thinks the Earth will be saved in time? Okay, almost half of the audience. Who thinks it is too late and humanity will ruin the Earth? Kristof? Okay. Who thinks the human race will become extinct? In the end, right? Who thinks capitalism should be blamed for all of this? Okay. Who thinks the bio-industry should be blamed for climate change? Bio-industry, like cow farms, big industrialized cow farms, for example. Yes? Okay. Who thinks everybody is to blame? Yeah, true. Who feels responsible for what happens to future generations? Kristof. Yeah, Kris also sighing. Who thinks the situation is not that bad, but the media ruin all positive perspectives? Okay, a few people. Who thinks the plastic soup is an inspiring topic to use in an artistic practice? Kris, okay. Who tries to engage with these topics in their artistic practice? So who uses, for example, the term Anthropocene in your artistic practice? Okay, few people. Okay, last one. Who feels these themes are interesting but don't fit in your artistic research? I see 2 hands on one person. That is not fair, but I see your point. Okay. Okay. Now we all know a little bit more on where we stand and what maybe the nature of tonight will be. Kristof Vrancken, could you tell me, you are a researcher in the group Interactions at Lucas School of Arts, and you research the relationship between humanity and the environment and what remains of human activity. As I mentioned before, this night is actually inspired by your doctoral research, the sustainist gaze. What does it actually mean, the sustainist gaze?
The sustainist gaze is actually... It comes from the sustainist design movement, which is a critical design force, which is a manifesto. And I took the manifesto from sustainist design and brought it into photography. And,
okay, because you are actually a photographer. You studied photography.
Yeah,
yes.
I studied photography, but I've always had a strong interest in design, photography, ecology, and biology. And with my PhD, everything comes together.
Nice, yes, and it has to do with actually a human hand. Well, the human. How do I say it? Well, the human presence, actually, or what humans did to the world. Is it a?
I've always had a strong interest in the relation between mankind and their environment and how they're influencing Earth, and vice versa, and how nature comes back to take over when humans left or leave.
Okay, so there is a little
interesting points.
Because when I hear the term sustainist gaze, I think about something that is left, that is sustained.
No, it's actually more like in a sustainable way of doing a practice.
Okay.
Like I used the sustainist design as a manifesto, and it made me doubt the digital work process I did. And it prompted me to return to search for alternatives that are more ecological. And in such a way, I came to a process which is called the endotype process. It's a 19th century photographic process, and I can make prints out of plants and berries. Okay,
so you reused actually it back in your practice as an artist as well. How is it actually the link between your research and your artistic practice? Is it doable?
Excuse me?
So the link between your... because I'm a researcher in the arts myself, and I have these doubts sometimes about, okay, I'm researching in theory, in academics, these things. How do you translate them back to your artistic practice? You already gave an example of, for example, using berries in your photographic process, actually, yeah.
Actually, my research made me rethink my artistic practice as a whole, and I started to combine all my interests, and it was an intriguing and fascinating journey because it opened up so many things and so many new tools in which I can tell my stories.
Yeah, you chose the theme for tonight. Why?
Because ecology was certainly one of the greatest factors driving my research. And it was during a lecture in London that I was first confronted with the term Anthropocene. And the word immediately had a big impact on me. And since then it has not let me go. And it made many things clear and unclear at the same time. And the word has a form of urgency in it, but the urgency is not clear. So it's a abstract urgency. And it's a concept with many meanings, it's a multiple and therefore difficult to understand, but it's also easy to abuse, the term Anthropocene. And that's why it's also a dangerous word.
And what is the danger of abuse? Why could it be dangerous?
Because some scientists believe that they could attract geoengineering. So they go engineer the whole Earth. So they think that the Earth is in danger and that they have to save the Earth, but from a man-made perspective. So they're going to launch satellites or a shield around Earth to tackle some climate change.
And what is your perspective?
I think we have to return to, or we have to listen to the earth and to nature and to become more one with nature. Instead of finding solutions for nature, we have to look for the solutions that nature can teach us.
We have to return to a certain state?
Maybe.
Or be more humble towards nature, maybe?
I think we definitely need to be more humble. And we are nature, and we are not mankind.
Okay. This is a quite interesting start. What do you hope will happen tonight? What do you hope we will hear in the discussions or take home with us?
Well, I think this evening is an invitation to celebrate the idea of the Anthropocene. And we must dare to give this dark vision a place in our lives. And we must embrace the unrest and depression that it's maybe causing us. And maybe depression is the most accurate way of experience this current ecological disaster. And this confrontation with our dark side as human beings can make us look for alternatives. And I think in alternatives in the way we think, see, and produce.
You gave us all a test tube. I might take one.
Yes, you may take one.
Yes, okay. I'm going to take one. So, has anybody guessed what's in it, actually? Blood. Oh, somebody knows? Yeah, okay, but maybe... yeah, what do you think it is, actually? Kristof's special fluid.
It's true.
Okay, it's true. I think that this might be one of your students, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what is it?
Well, it's a photographic emulsion that's also drinkable, but I have to explain a little more, because Anthropocene is a difficult and abstract concept.
There is also a picture appeared behind us, yeah?
I think it's necessary to make it personal. And I made an image just for tonight. It's an image from the Ford factory in Genk. And the image shows the demolition of the Ford factory. And it's an important historical and symbolic moment. And the closure of Ford in 2015 was a social tragedy. And at its peak, the factory produced almost 500,000 cars each year. And we recycled some of their tires. After the closure, the company sold its grounds for €1 symbolic to the city, but the costs involving with cleaning up the site with pollution are estimated at $12 million. And even after the factory is demolished and disappeared, traces of the pollutants will remain on the site, although invisible. And establishment of metal processing companies and other heavy industrial branches brought economic development to the city, but also had severe ecological consequences. And it just shows on a micro scale how complex the links are between ecology, economy, and the social fabric. And there's no single perspective. We need all angles to see these issues. And the image that you're seeing is made of a light-sensitive organic emulsion that you're holding in your arms right now, in your hands right now. And the emulsion is based on berries that are hand-picked from this location. And thanks to the 19th century anthotype process, the landscape itself generates the image and creates an interesting relationship between image and place. And plants that survive in polluted areas absorb heavy metals in its system. And they absorb heavy metals from soil and the air. And they store them in their system. And in this way, the pollutants, and thanks to the anthotype process, the heavy metals will be in the print itself. Mm-hmm. And if we drink the emulsion, it also becomes part of our food chain, on our food chain. Yeah. So the photographic emulsion is not only light sensitive, but also drinkable. And I've researched the relation between image quality and taste. And I can assure you that the taste is really good and sweet. And the recipe for this emulsion is based on old liquor recipes and contains hand-picked berries, jenever, and sugar. However, the berries used have been harvested on this site. So they may contain nickel, chromium, manganese, and zinc. It's not deadly in an instant. But prolonged exposure to these substances may cause health problems. And these metals are tasteless, odorless, and can therefore end up in your body almost unimpeded. The juice of the berries is diluted, making the concentration of heavy metals probably lower than when you walk a few days in the area. But drinking the act itself makes you a conscious carrier of the Anthropocene. And I hope the drink will let the unrest settle into yourself. So let this drink be a potion, a liquid with healing, magical, and poisonous properties. A potion to the Anthropocene. Let it be dark, uncanny, sinister, and sweet.
So, thank you, Kristof, for this proposed toast. So, I heard about this before the talk, of course, and I didn't know, shall I drink this? Shouldn't I drink this? And I thought maybe it has the same amount of poison as an apple that I didn't properly wash. Mm-hmm. So, and I thought, okay, actually, poison is all around us, and I maybe don't see it. Or if I stand too close to the ring in Antwerp, maybe I have the same amount of poison in my body.
It's possible. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Kristof, you proposed a toast. What shall we toast on?
The Anthropocene.
On the Anthropocene. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's your own responsibility if you drink this. AZ Nights is not responsible.
You will notice the effects in 70 years.
So thank you very much, Kristof. So this was quite the introduction. It's actually quite good, quite sweet. Wow, what have I done? Regret. So, A toast to the Anthropocene. And I think this is a really good introduction for our first guest of tonight, Sue Spaid. Welcome to the stage. Sue Spaid is an American philosopher. Maybe I should sit here so I can watch my clock, and then if you can.
Am I supposed to have a seat?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, but
okay.
Or we can stand maybe as well. Yeah, because you will. Yeah,
We can stand.
Yeah, because I will lead you to the. I will leave the stage in a bit. So, Sue, you're an American philosopher, curator, and a writer, and you're based in Belgium. Why in Belgium?
That guy over there, he imported me.
Oh, that explains it all. And you work as a curator, and you developed over 100 exhibitions, both in Europe and in the US. And you started working with the notion ecovention, which is joining actually the term ecology and invention. And this term now is far more common used, but you actually started using the term.
That's true. We coined it. A girlfriend of mine, we were working on an exhibition in 1999, just before the millennium, and we saw that there were examples of land art that actually had a function, and we didn't really know how to address this because land art normally doesn't ever have a function. And so we wanted to have a little subset of land art that was different than the rest, that was somehow practical or functional.
Yes, on this function we will talk a little bit later. But in the exhibits that you curate, you express, you present the work of ecologists, designers, and scientists who think about tackling and solving ecological problems. And tonight you will present conceptual frameworks for the artistic practice and challenges for the art world, facing this Anthropocene. So the stage is all yours, Sue.
Okay, I hadn't thought about doing this as a question, but before I start, does anyone want to guess, does anyone know what the population of the planet is these days? Throw out a number, 1 through 10. 8, that's pretty close. And does anyone know what the population was in 1800? 1. So we're growing very fast, and it's actually my first slide, but it's actually more fun to do it as call and response. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to look at the population just for 1 sec, because I think that, the word anthropo is man, is humankind, human beings, right? And so I'm asking this question: can we, Homo sapiens, ever escape the Anthropocene? And this question has many different, it can be understood in many different ways. One is, will we solve the Anthropocene? Will we, one of the ways you might escape it is if we get climate change under control and it no longer is risking to increase 2 degrees Celsius. But the other one is population control. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to 1 billion. I mean, that's going to be really something catastrophic. And I just want to point out one point about the 2.5 and the 2.2. So basically, right now, the average woman has 2.5 births per female, and we're going to slow that down a bit. And that's the trend, is to go to 2.2. But even by reducing our population rate, we're still going to increase by 20%. But anyway, this is not a birth control talk. It's just something to think about when you're thinking about the Anthropocene, because in fact we are the anthropo. Okay, so I'm a member of a group called Permanent Questions, and all we do is ask people questions. So I'm not going to ask an infinite number. I have 6 on my mind right now. And in my talk, the first 3 I'm just going to go over really quickly in slide form, and I'm going to focus more on the last 4. But okay, so why focus on the Anthropocene? And one of the questions that Katrina asked you is the problem with the Anthropocene really capitalism? That is a lot of people say they call themselves either anti-Anthropocene or post-Anthropocene. And they argue, well, it's kind of ridiculous. It's not humans, it's capitalism. So that's one thing to think about. And if you want to know all the different solutions to how to think about this, you can just Google T.J. Damos resistance. And he has a whole paper on all the different things you can use to call all the alternative terms to the Anthropocene. The second thing is, I asked myself, she introduced me as someone who organizes exhibitions of ecological artworks or ecoventions. And it's not really the only thing I organize, the only kind of exhibitions, but I know that there's escalation. And I asked myself, why do people actually think that organizing an exhibition about climate change or the Anthropocene is going to have any value? What's the use? Is it really just that there's a lot of artists these days working that way, and therefore we should have an exhibition? Or are communities trying to change the views of their citizens? So the question is, why are there so many why is there an escalation of exhibitions? The third one, should artists have to do anything? That is a big question. Why should any of you guys who make things have to do something in particular that has a function that works on the Anthropocene or that can contribute? Then the next thing is, how could art positively impact the Anthropocene? With that, I will talk about ecoventions. So Katerina had told you that ecoventions, it's from ecology plus invention. But more particularly, I call it an artist-initiated practical action with ecological intent. So why do ecoventions work? What can we learn from eco-artists? What is ecological intent? And how does green design differ from eco-art? Can eco-art exhibitions be exemplary of green design? So those are the questions that seemed to be on my mind when I was invited to do this Anthropocene and artistic practices. So I don't expect anyone to read that. It's just a gauge. It's a chronology of exhibitions starting with 99, ending in 2017. And you can see there are more and more and more exhibitions on ecological topics. So it's not something I'm making up. In the early millennial, there were sort of a third as many. And 2017 looks short because I finished the book in May of last year. And there probably were another 10 exhibitions. But anyway, it just gives you a running tally. This is not anything I expect anyone to read. I'm using this as an example. So here's this debate. Should artists have to do anything? So it takes place, there's people there from Sweden, there's people there from England, there's people there from the States, a lot of people of France, if you guys have read Relational Aesthetics from Nicola Borio. So it's a bunch of people on the planet. A lot of them think that this is too much of a burden. Artists shouldn't have to do things. In fact, the biggest criticism of artists having to do things is that artists are usually having to do things that the government should be doing. So if the artists do it, then that kind of gets the government off the hook. Anyway, so you can see I'm pretty much implicated in this debate. I cannot escape the millennial debate. I've been playing a role in it since the very beginning because I've been doing so many exhibitions about actions and artworks that do something. So I want to give you a picture in your head about what this ecovention term means, because if we get going too fast, too far, and you're still like, what is she talking about? And you don't have an image, it won't be any kind of fun. So these are 5 examples, and for some reason I'm always working in a clockwise situation, which may be even more difficult. But so in the upper, where 1 o'clock would be, is a work by Mariette Potrich and Uz, where there was an oil spill right in the middle of downtown Brussels, and the company, I think it's British Shell, they had tried to fix it, and they tried to restore the land, but they didn't do a very good job. So they invited these artists to come and do it, and the artists brought plants and had an interesting strategy and cleaned it up. They didn't clean it up perfectly in the sense that humans were allowed to drink the water, but it was cleaned up well enough that animals could drink the water. On the bottom right is a grad from the famous PXL MAD, Veritans, and she did a rainwater harvesting system, and you can see she's taking the rainwater off the roof. You can see the pipe going through her system, and this system cleans water better than any water treatment plant in all of Europe. So just by stacking up some well-chosen plants and running the water through, she's been able to make a new way of thinking about rainwater harvesting. And it could very well be in 30 years, every building in Europe is required to have a system like this on site. At the bottom, you can't really tell what they're doing, but it's definitely it's a it's a protest in favor of the water, where the artist has worked with people and they've made these braids and they put them up all over the place to bring attention to the river. On the lower left-hand side is the world's first bicycle that cleans air. When people ride it around, it takes the particles out of the air, like the diesel particulates, for example. And finally, at the top is a beehive that's transparent and has actually held bees before, and it is a really great tool for teaching people all about bee colonies, because normally you can't see inside of a bee colony. So those are 5 examples, and all of them are Belgian except for the bicycle. Well, no, the one at the bottom is Polish, and the one on the left is a Danish group, N55. Okay. But that just gives you an idea. Artists, when I talk about practical actions with ecological intent initiated by artists, this is what I have in mind. Actually, artists working outdoors and coming up with a solution. How am I doing in time? Okay. All right. So I just want to go over this really quickly. This is a criticism of why people don't want artists to be doing things. As the criticism goes, artists who do the government's bidding are not only not free, that is to pursue their preferred avenues of art making, but they are complicit with governments who outsource their responsibilities to artists or anyone willing to fix the problem. Thus, art loses on all fronts. Artists lose funding to make their best art. The government funds and rewards only art that fits its agenda, and art history plays second fiddle to community enrichment schemes. That's the criticism, but I want to really emphasize that these artists they're not working for the government. They're either working for themselves or they're working, a lot of them, if you say, who's your client? They say planet Earth. That's who their client is. So when you take that into consideration, then you realize that, in fact, the criticisms of art that does something doesn't really apply for them, because they are actually, they're not doing the government's bidding. They're doing what they think they should be doing. Okay, so I told you I'm partly to blame for these debates, and as Katerina said, I wear 2 hats. One as a curator and one as a philosopher. So I thought, I ought to go at this in a more philosophical way. So I gave you some examples of practical artworks, and now I want to talk about it in a little bit more philosophical way. So here's a question. It doesn't really seem as so relevant in Europe as it does in the States, where we have lots of climate skeptics and people that don't believe in evolution. But the question is, why don't these people believe in evolution? Why are they climate skeptics? Can we reach them? That's a question. Another question is, how could artworks even reach these people? How can it influence them? No one really knows. One question is, one thing I've seen a lot is that it does demonstrate the possibility for change. And when people are presented with change, they tend to think differently. T.J. Damas, he's a huge critic of this approach. He calls it rearranging the deck chairs on the sinking Titanic. So that's a different approach. And then finally, this is, to me, the most difficult question, is when you're making let's say you decide to make eco-ventions and you decide to have planet Earth as your client, and you decide to remedy a system in an innovative way, the question is beautiful for whom, why, and how. And that's, I think, one of the biggest questions that seems to be on Kristof's mind, is that those people engineering the planet and trying to protect it don't seem to really have the planet's interest in mind. They seem to have humans' interest in mind. Did I skip a step? Wait. Okay. So I want to tell you something about, I'm going to try to answer the first question, because the first question, as I told you, was why don't people believe in things? Like, is it just they don't have the right information? Well, more and more we're realizing that it's not just simply information, education. It turns out that a lot of the people that don't believe are just they know as much about the science as the people that do believe. Well, it turns out that there's something called cognitive states, and our perceptions are often influenced by beliefs and biases, all sorts of things we don't even necessarily know we have. And I give some examples here. Apparently, if I give you white wine that's been colored red, you'll drink it and it will taste like red wine. So that's an example of some sort of cognitive state in action. Another example, and then of course, if you have certain beliefs, you're going to see things differently than other people. So if you believe in climate change and you can see, then you'll probably even notice it's getting warmer, or you'll notice that there's more storms, or you'll notice all sorts of things that other people are able to totally ignore. So that's one explanation, that because of cognitive states, we're not all perceiving the world exactly the same. Other people are perceiving it differently than we are. Or the people that believe differently than we do perceive it differently. Okay, so I call this the cognitive states problem. And the reason I call it the cognitive states problem is because we normally think that if we can see something, other people can see it. But if we start to realize that we see the world differently because we have certain beliefs and we have certain desires and we have certain experiences and we have certain, even, it's if you know people that know every kind of species and they're walking around and this is a that and this is a that, you kind of think, gosh, I would have just ignored, I wouldn't have even noticed that tree, or I wouldn't have noticed that flower, I wouldn't have noticed that dog even. They all look like dogs, But the more specific we are, the more aware we are. So the solution, rather than merely provide more information, getting non-believers to perceive certain symptoms requires also devising strategies that address their values. So if this cognitive states problem is true, information is not enough, since beliefs tend to override scientifically proven facts. So the reason this is relevant is because I've come to the understanding, or I have a working hypothesis, let's say, that the reason why there's this push to have all these ecological art exhibitions these days isn't, if people are doing it because they think people need more information, they're probably not going to succeed. If they're doing it because they understand that artworks operate on the level of values, and they challenge people's values, and they make people rethink their values, and they make people wonder what their values are, and if they make people just more... What's happening? I feel... Do we know what the time is? I know. I have 10 minutes left? Okay, great. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Okay. Anyway, so that's the point. The point is that we have to be aware. The solution is to understand that artworks work on the level of values, and that we just have to be aware of that so that we can think about values and think about. And it's also interesting to me that artists don't seem daunted by other people's values that are different than their own, because they're really not trying to persuade people. So I think that's also another probable explanation for the question, why do people think artworks can reach people? Okay. All right, this is my last slide with 1 million pieces of text on it. But I just want to go over something that's also related to what Kristof was talking about. So a Japanese-American philosopher named Yuriko Sato, she's argued that we have to appreciate nature on its own terms. And the question is, well, how do we do that? What does it mean to appreciate nature on its own terms? So I try to argue that if we do appreciate nature on its own terms, we don't only take care of nature, but we notice nature when it's sick. Just like if your friends are sick, you notice when they're sick, or your children, you notice when they're sick, and you try to figure out how you can make them better, and you take an action. You don't just go, oh, they're sick. So I have something I call the kinship model, which really is trying to articulate the way humans are already in a relationship with nature, an ongoing, where nature sustains us, we're part of nature, we owe something to nature. It's not just simply we should feel guilty about it, but we're in a relationship with nature, and that's what I call the kinship model. Okay, so I had the question, beautiful for whom, why, and how, and now I feel like I might be able to address this a little bit better. So the for whom are the actual beneficiaries or natural objects that stand to benefit by another evaluation of worth. The stakeholders, those are people who notice that nature is sick and want to try to figure out how it's out of balance, or how it could be more in equilibrium. And finally, stakeholders thus encourage practices that ensure outcomes in order to safeguard desired aesthetic properties. And one virtue of artists' recommendations is that their strategies prove feasible. That's another thing that's similar to what Kristof was talking about. He thinks we're going to go back to a period, but I think the period that we're going to go back to or that we're going to embrace is one where we are actors in our own environment and doing things, relying less on machines and relying less on giant technologies that are distant from us. Maybe Kris will have a different take on it, but that's the opposing view. Not the opposing, maybe complementary. Okay, so I gave you a lot of philosophical ideas and terms, but now I just want to give you a simple haiku that comes from Leopold Aldo, who's sort of one of the founders of ecology. And he says, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. So it's just a simple few words, but the point is that this probably even applies to your own designs and your own work that you do, not even just the biotic community. Now the biotic community, not Leopold or any other stakeholder, is designated the beneficiary for whom integrity, stability, and beauty are optimized, if not maximized. So the question is now, well, how do we optimize integrity, stability, and beauty? Let's see. Okay, so one question is, what is ecological intent? So this is a sort of a debate between me and my husband. So Jean-Francois says that, ecological intent, that's just respect for ecosystems, which is, I think, where Kristof was going. And then I was thinking, well, it's interesting. In nature does, well, it's not perfect, but it's not known for making waste the way humans are. So in a weird way, we know that one indication that there's an equilibrium is that there's less waste. So it seems to me that ecological intent could be to just limit waste. Okay, so some ideas that are really simple: ecological strategies, whether art or design, optimize procedures that minimize the extraction, transportation, and processing of raw materials, including rainwater and bananas. Redeploy all waste streams so there are none. Reward regenerative agriculture, build natural infrastructure, and employ natural infiltration, maximize biodiversity. If you do this, you can also reduce energy consumption, produce carbon sinks, address flooding, and mitigate against climate change. Okay, this is a lot to think about, but every one of us can take a part of this puzzle and contribute something. Okay, so the future economy will require hydrologists, horticulturists, and citizens connected to nature to re-terra Earth. So that's just one example of what it could mean to have ecological intent. So now I just want to go through some quick examples of the ecoventions in more detail. So again, most of these go clockwise. The CW means clockwise. So Lara Armosigai, you might know her because she has worked a lot in this in Limburg. She owns some landing. Well, she doesn't own it. She's sequestered some land in Genk to keep it from being developed. And the very blurry photo at the bottom is a book that she did, The Ruins in Netherlands, where she went around photographing, photographing wastelands. And the one on the upper left is an image of from a performance in a forest. Well, where am I on time now? 2 minutes? Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, well, I better... Well, how about this? I'm just going to go through the slides, and if anyone's interested, I can give you a PowerPoint, but you get maybe some pictures. Here are different artists who... So this is a whole category of valuing anew, so you can see artists are trying to make people think differently about the land. These are all the different biodiversity projects that are going on in different places. These are people working on making their communities better, or mostly urban infrastructure, because a lot of ecological problems in the city are just simply that there aren't the facilities. Here are some giant reclamation projects for land restoration and reclamation, or water reclamation. Food security, I'm sure you guys know at least someone who's involved in urban farming. Climate change, mostly activism, but on the piece on the right, it's more than activism. They were able to communicate, they were able to convince people in the Netherlands to take land that had been farming land and then turn it into a wetland again and make it have a lake. It's a before and after image. And this is Ecos, which is one of the, as a lot of artists are now working on ameliorating other people with the view that part of the reason that everything is broken down is because even people feel broken down, and you can't really heal the earth if you need healing yourself. Okay. All right, I think that I won't do justice to go through this so quickly, but I just want to make one point about design, the design projects and the ecoventions. So I don't know if you noticed this, but all the ecoventions that you saw, the artists have made them. So it's like the artists design both the alpha model and they test it, so the alpha and the beta. But what's interesting about artists is a lot of times they drop it after that and they go to the next project. So eventually they give a lot of their ideas away. But I wanted to point, has anyone heard about this land art generative initiator? This is a weird, these are people that think that they're doing ecological green design, but in my mind, the level of resource exploitation is so intense, it's really hard for me to see this as either as green design. But anyway, I just brought this in case you guys are aware of this group. Well, it's not group, it's actually an international contest. They have a contest every 2 years. They choose a place, and then they ask designers to come up with scalable models for these different communities. Okay, so this is my last slide, I believe. So green design engenders environmentally friendly products whose designs can be taught, improved upon, and applied broadly, whereas ecoventions are typically prototypes, one-off solutions initiated by artists to redress a particular site's environmental issues, which they expect others, especially designers and ecologists, to eventually copy. That's kind of interesting, right? So these artists really want to be copied. And I think to myself, well, that's interesting. Why do they want to be copied? But they want to be copied because they always want to move on to their next project, and they're hoping that they'll inspire someone else to take up some of their ideas. My worries. Too often green design presents attractive, though largely unusable and resource-intensive products. There needs to be more emphasis on renewable materials and collaborating with landscape architects to build natural infrastructure. Green design owes a greater fidelity to truth than ordinary design, since it is meant to do far more than mere window dressing. That's another thing. Sometimes when we see ads for green design in the newspapers and the magazines, you look at it, you're like, I don't even really know that can do what it promises to do. But in a weird way, it seems that green design ought to be truer. Like it's making commitments to having the planet as its client, and does it really go that far? All right, so green design stands to do far more long-term damage should their outcomes not live up to their promised functions. All right, this is, again, not supposed to be something you read, but in the catalog we just did, we had a sustainable printing manifesto, do this and no to this and yes to that. And then in the last very blurry pages, the designer actually did a self-analysis to see whether or not all the decisions he made had contributed to the ecological, to making the catalog more ecological. Because you could argue that having a catalog itself is pretty unecological, right? But it is a print-on-design catalog, so it's not like there's thousands of them sitting in storage somewhere. And then some of the innovations, I don't know if they're innovations, but some of the options. So shipping locally, email globally. I mean, these days you can email a lot of artworks that you couldn't have done a couple years ago. We just saw a show in Spain where everything was framed, but nothing was shipped. It was genius. So she had gone to like some sort of frame warehouse and then printed everything to fit in her frames that she had on hand, and then framed everything up, and then after the exhibition, she can reuse her frames. I thought that was a really interesting idea. Another ecological thing that no one ever thinks about is space utilization. Not having lots of empty space, using your walls, this is something I think about a lot, is how do we, how do we be more ecological with space? And then, of course, using the collection. Anyway, there's loads of ways that ecological exhibitions can be more ecological, even though lots of people say an ecological exhibition is a juxtaposition in terms, because any exhibition... Anyway, you don't have to paint. You can use pre-existing walls. Thank you, Al. Okay, that was really quick. Thank you.
You can have a seat. Thank you so much. Wim. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Lots of themes, actually lots of super interesting subjects passed in your talk that I think we can talk for hours about. But maybe my first question is, you already mentioned this, but to select an artist to curate, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. Does the artwork need to work in a certain way? Like, does it have to, for example, the customer, Mother Earth, does she have to be made better by the artwork? Is that like the criterion you use?
Well, I think the criterion would be that the artist intended to do something.
Okay.
Because there are artworks that fail. I mean, these are not most of them these days work with scientists, so they're not just on their own, but there is a chance that it won't work the way they think it will work. For example, I don't know if one of the images I showed you was from Melchin's revival field, which he worked with a scientist, and they tested 96 different kinds of plants to see which ones would bring metals up. Mm-hmm. They had no clue whether it was going to work or not. They had 96 different tests going on, and it turned out it worked really well. And now it's a $1 billion, $400 million business or something. But anyway, not for the artists, but for the people that copied. But I'm just saying, there are loads of examples of works that fail as science but work as art.
Exactly, and that's the boundary, let's say. That's
also the safety. I mean, that's one of the reasons why these artists can take more risks, is because they don't have the same limiting parameters as scientists might, where scientists really can't fail. I mean, well, if they fail, they just don't tell anyone. But, they keep it a secret, I guess.
Yeah. But I think you also mentioned this, so artists leave their work behind maybe just at the moment it could start working. Do you have examples of artworks that work now? Let's take something in the world?
Let's take the example of N55. They're the ones who invented the bicycle, the air cleaning bicycle.
Exactly.
So if they really were like inventors, they'd be like, oh my God, we got our genius idea. They go to the patent office, they get it patented, and then they have a prototype, and they go to the manufacturer and they say, here, this is something you can make $1 billion with, design it, sell it, market it. But instead, they put if you know anything about N55, they put all of their designs on the internet. It's all in the commons, and they really want everyone around the world to make their designs. Just give them credit. Don't say I designed this, but say I built it. So I think that's a way a lot of them work. A lot of them are it's not that they're terrible business people. N55 have so many designs that they can't really turn everything into a business. It wouldn't be fun for them. It's much more fun for them to do a design, test it, put it out there, and see people use it, and then see another problem, and then address the next problem.
Mm-hmm. So idealism is a major part also?
I don't know, but these people are idyllic. They're more practical than idyllic. Pragmatic, maybe.
Yeah, because I would say, giving your ideas away
is idyllic. Is idealist?
No, wouldn't it be?
I didn't.
Because you could make a lot of money with it, for example, right? No,
I'm not against the idea. I think we use idealism differently.
Okay.
Than
idealism in the way that you are trying to make the world better.
Okay, if that's the definition of idealism, then they're idealists.
Okay.
I mean, I think that they're just simply they all work on a very low level of resources, mm-hmm. and I think they're just trying to try things rather to have some agency. Artists, that's one thing that is really special about artists, is they do have agency. They're used to like, for example, I noticed when I wrote my book on artists who farm as art that, in a weird way, one of the reasons artists make such great farmers is they're incredible observers. You know, they're used to observing, they're used to staring at something for like 4 or 5 hours, you know, drawing from still life. So they're really good at observing. They can work on tedious projects. They can work on things alone, and they can problem solve, and they're systems oriented. All these things really, I think art school trains people differently than like even going to agriculture school, or engineering school.
Or design?
I don't know. I can't speak for design school, because I think that probably design school is going to be closer to an art school than where you do. I think that designers would have agency as well.
Yeah. So also to talk about schools, you today you were at a school?
Yes, I spent the day at PXL-MAD.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. That's how I say it. How do you say it?
I wouldn't think so.
No mad? Okay.
So are there any students here? Yes, that you saw today, right?
I don't know. I can't see anybody.
So, but...
you must have to ask, did anyone see her?
Yeah? Did anybody see? Yeah, Sue? Yeah, I see one hand. But my question is actually, do you see that the young generation or the people you saw today, are they interested in the Anthropocene? Do you see...
Well, that's a good question, because there were 3 artists who are definitely dealing with landscape and definitely dealing with... and one guy said, well, I used to be a Boy Scout, which I often think to myself that Belgium's commitment to the Scouts, it should be the #1 environmental country in Europe. There is no country with more Scouts. But strangely, I've never seen a correlation between the scouting. Like the people, as soon as they turn 18, they stop scouting and they stop thinking about it. But anyway, so I would love to be able to channel that energy somehow. Anyway, but so he talked about scouting and landscape, but he couldn't figure out, he never would admit that he was focus on the landscape. I don't know if that's because he didn't think he could. There was another one.
So the focus in nature is somehow impractical as well, you think? Is there like some kind of boundary that artists have to cross before they use nature as their subject?
Well, I think that truthfully, there's very few artists who do it. Most of these artists were painters at one point. And some of them are sculptors, but something happens in them that they want to go outside and they lose interest in the studio practice.
Okay.
So to get back to your question, today everyone I visited has a studio practice. So we saw one work that was outdoors, but it was a billboard. It was, but I think it's the kind of. But Vera Tans went to PXL-MAD, and she had been doing all this research before she met me. And she was already working outdoors. So it's maybe something that happens when, I don't know.
An interaction with the world, perhaps?
Well, I think they have to know about how the art exists. And I never asked Vera how she discovered. Tuan, are you here?
Oh, Vera is the lady who does agriculture, actually, right?
She was the one who did the rainwater treatment.
Oh, yes.
Her son told me he was going to come. Yeah. Vera, Tuan, are you here? No, he didn't come. Anyway,
okay.
Her son, I ran into him today, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to come to your talk." So he might be able to tell us how Vera discovered ecoventions, but it's not taught in art history. This is a problem. I mean, this is a huge problem. It's difficult to find out about this kind of art because there's very few art historians that work in the field, and you're certainly not going to get a job as a curator at a museum if you do your PhD on ecoventions. I don't think any museum is going to hire you because they're not really in the business of commissioning this kind of work either. So it's difficult to find out about it unless you. I don't know how people find out about it.
Yeah. True talks like this one, I guess.
I hope so.
Yeah. To make a little bridge to our next speaker. Actually, our title is Dark Ecology, but that is a term you specifically don't use, right? Why not?
Well, I think that I want to believe that ecology or ecosystems are already really complex and they're not idyllic. This is IDYLLIC. So they're not they're not pure, they're not innocent, they're not... I think that the reason why people started evoking dark ecology is they wanted to somehow provoke people to think differently about the ecology. But for me, I already have this... I want to present an image of the ecology as not necessarily something that can be in balance, not necessarily something that has an equilibrium, but something that we can potentially manage it, not manage its equilibrium, but be more cognitive of it and see what is causing it to be out of equilibrium. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that a lot of the people focused on deep ecology, they come out of the genre of horror, and the genre of horror is really popular in film, and it gets only more every year. There's more and more horror films, and one of the products of the horror genre in the visual art world is something I call catastrophe art. So you see, everything is like apocalyptic, or it's not that it's negative, but I think that it does. You look at it and you go like, oh, that's scary.
Well, there's a danger, an inherent danger in nature? Or?
No, well, I'm just talking about either the horror genre or the catastrophic genre. Mm-hmm. So it's either a cathartic process, but it doesn't really you don't leave thinking like, oh, I can make a difference, or I could do something differently. You just leave thinking, oh, it's really scary, or that's scary fun, that's scary entertaining, that's scary, you know what I mean? Scary, it's more gets you on an emotional level, but again, it leaves you frightened. And I want to empower people and have them imagine that they can do things differently if they just have a different approach. Mm-hmm. I think, I don't know did anyone see the movie Demain that was really popular 2 years ago?
What movie?
It was called Demain, en français.
Demain. No? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
One. Yeah.
Okay, so that movie I think was really... I think it was the biggest success in Belgium, probably more than any other country in Europe. But one of the reasons why it was so popular is it really gave you specific examples of things people are doing all around the world, and it made you think, oh, I want to be part of that. It didn't make you think like, oh, well, if they can do that, they do that there, but we would never do that here. Mm-hmm. It made you think, oh, I might be able to rethink how I have my community. And is that how other people felt? Not really?
The one person who saw it? Yes.
Really empowering.
Yeah.
An empowering film, Demain.
So don't you agree? It's a little different to see Demain, which is empowering, than to see some movie about like a natural disaster where everyone drowns and one person survives and they're living a miserable life by themselves or something. I really...
So maybe I think we have to close off. Can we have one more question from the audience, perhaps? Okay, let's see. Are there any questions? We can also... there's one question.
I'm curious about, you already mentioned it a little bit, but how do you see the role of science in relation to art and in relation to ecovention?
How do you say the role of science in relation to art and ecoventions?
Okay, so more and more these artists are really working with scientists from the very beginning. And a lot of them are only interested to do the project if it can be proven to have a scientific effect. So, for example, in Finland, there's a place called Halakadlahti. Lahti is Finnish for lake. And it used to be a water treatment plant, and it was filled with like oils and chemicals that had been used to treat the water. And then somehow the government decided that, we want to have it as a waterfowl or a bird sanctuary. So the artist is like, now what can I do? So she started working with biologists, and she built 3 artificial islands, 2 as habitat and 1 particularly for birds for feeding and spawning. And it's very important to her that the scientists can tell her, well, she's now deceased, but 10 years ago when she was doing it, it was very important that they were on from the very beginning. They advised her about the plants. They advised her about blah, 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 all the details. And then they can say, oh, yes, we do get this many birds coming here. We do see a transformation of the landscape. We do see. So it's a lot of these artists are really, there's a meadow in Liverpool that was originally a blue flower meadow next to a yellow flower meadow. There were like 2 patches. So the artist They probably worked as volunteers, but they got some biologists to do species counts, and they were able to see, like, oh wow, isn't that interesting? These insects prefer yellow flowers and these ones prefer blue flowers. But that kind of a test had never been done because no crazy person ever thought to make a blue meadow next to a yellow meadow. You know what I mean? That this is something an artist would think, oh, I want to have these two different square meadows and I want to see what it will do and how it will work. And it's the same thing a lot with the urban beekeeping. A lot of the urban beekeepers around the world, which is hugely popular, a lot of it is started by artists. And now the scientists are working their biodiversity studies around. They're very influenced by the beekeeping movements in the cities. So it's just the science plays a huge role. Partly because the artists want to be legitimate. They're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because they have an idea that they want to test, and they want to test it proper. They want to go about the experiment as best they can.
I'm sorry. Maybe we can. Sorry, Reid. I think we need to proceed to our next speaker. But I think we can talk for hours. So maybe you can meet each other at the bar again. So, Sue Spaid, thank you so much for this. Oh. So, Kris Verdonck is our next guest. He's educated in visual arts, architecture, and theater. Kris Verdonck plays with the border between visual arts and theater, between installation and performance, between dance and architecture. In this way, he researches the fascination for the relationship between the human and the machine, as I already said. And recently, he created Innerwoud, an installation, a circular installation with no humans in it, actually about the absence of human race. And then there is a theater play, Conversations at the End of the World, also made in 2016, where Kris researches how will we as humans act and talk just before catastrophe strikes. And tonight he will take us on a journey in his mind. I'm very curious about that, through his own brain exercises. And I'm very curious how we can relate to them. Kris Verdonck, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Good evening. Just about the beekeepers, I love them also. We have a little problem now in Brussels that we can't keep bees anymore because there are not enough flowers for the bees. So there are too many beekeepers because it's a kind of a hype now. And these, there are not enough flowers.
We need to grow more.
We grow more flowers. And this is quite inspiring for me. The fact that we need to put more, we want to do the beekeeping thing, but actually we forgot that they need flowers. And I think that's, I would love to, just by listening at stuff, I would love to do some, first of all, I'm trying here, I will just talk about my point of view or my artistic practice, and not as a curator or so, but just what inspires and how to deal with things or somehow. Just for the artists around or people that do the creative things. A friend of mine went to Madrid some time ago, a year ago, and he went to Wikipedia to look for famous Madrillians. And until the 70s, it were painters and writers, and from the 70s, there were football players. I think football players are now one of the major and most important people in the world. All the money goes there. They are the big heroes. And the artists, since the 60s, our position is being, due to the old guys, compromised almost completely. The question is, if you read papers and you see, the artists are doing something nonsensical again, these beautiful things, and I think they're very worthwhile, etc. But I'm very concerned about our position as artists and how to be taken serious and what's our position in the world at this moment? What do we have to say? What's our position? And I'm very concerned about it. To say it with Herbert Achterenbusch, it's a German playwright. You have no chance, but you have to take it. And he saw it really. Somebody was drowning. Another guy said, like, shall I jump? And he says, like, yeah, go ahead. You don't have a chance, but you have to try it. And I think that's a very interesting one. Being an artist, just go for it. But don't expect too much. Heiner Müller, also German playwright, it's very inspiring for me. We are here for a short while. As specimen, we will be replaced if we go, by animals or machines, and that's okay. They're also good. They're also complex. There's also these machines. If they would replace us, they also produce beauty. They will take care of I don't know what. So it's okay to go. Nobody really misses us. G.J. Ballard, also very positive, the writer of Crash, as you might know. He says, like, well, I'm an artist that will not say, be careful, bend ahead, drive slower. He would say, drive faster, there's a bend in front as a position. And the hope. You were asking about the hope. Hope is easy. I really like the hope is easy. It comes from a discussion on Dutch television, and one of the biologists says, like, yeah, hope. Yeah, do we still have hope? Well, hope is easy. Hope is something you can produce. Hope is something, but to really do something, that's something completely different. You can have hope, but that was cheap in his sense, in his idea. Stephen Hawking, some time ago, he put it on Alta Vista Questions. He posed, should we still go on? Wouldn't we just stop with it? And then you can post answers, like the best answer of Alta Vista. And the one with the most votes was, well, we just can't stop. We cannot. I mean, we can say you can shoot a bullet, but if you don't do that, what to do? And I think that's the question. What to do? And then I would like to go for, there's Sir Martin Rees, Royal Astronomer. He wrote the wonderful little book, 10, this one, Our Final Century, 10 examples how we will destroy the planet. 10 very good examples, biological warfare, the whole thing. He just goes one by one. And his idea at one point was, why not have this kind of ecological commission, a moralistic thing, like a commission with important scientists that would discuss, and if you do an invention, you go to them and you say, what do you think of it? And they say, they can judge if it's life-threatening for life on Earth. Then they say, you can't invent it. Sorry, no go. And then immediately you feel this kind of, can we? Can we stop? Can we not invent something? Is that something of our specimen? Will we say, we will not do this because, yes, we can, but we don't? Can I say that again? Yes, we can, but we don't. So this is so no, and I'm quite convinced about that there's this kind of urge deep inside of us that is maybe self-destructive, but no, we cannot invent something not. It's just too tempting. It's there, and we will use with all the energy of our human specimen of whatever we can invent, we will invent. Was there an experiment crossing a chimpanzee with a human being? Yes, of course, because we can, and that's probably the big reason why we did it, because we simply can. And if we don't do it here in Europe, well, we'll find another place to do it. So I think deep inside of us, there is this self-destructive thing, or this urge. And the question also, well, is it such a bad thing? And what does it produce? What does this urge to go on produce? I sincerely hope, and that's something completely different than my artistic practice, I sincerely hope we will not invent some things, but I don't trust us. And so I think also, well, all these things, like there is no chance but take it, I think it's a very positive thing also. It's a very courageous thing. And I think in the artistic practice, there is no reason why there would be an issue, a thing in the newspapers, in the world happening, without you grasping it, looking to it for hours, and trying to understand what the fuck is it? What is it? This glass, try to understand what it is. And I think that is the main goal of artists. Try to understand stuff, on which level, whatever. Try to understand things. Play with it like a dog plays with slippers. Just rub it open, take it open, play with it, do something new. Well, the dog doesn't do anything new with it, but anyway. And you put it in the world and you think like, this is what I did. What do you reckon? So that's this. How far am I? Okay. So this position of a maker, of somebody who lives or walks on this planet and watches things and tries to understand. One of my favorite topics is, surprise, warfare. And there's something really interesting, I think. And I'm trying now on a topic on what are we doing here? Who are we and what is our daily, contemporary, daily life condition? We all nag always about we don't have no choice anymore. We don't have this, we don't there, we don't here, and probably it's true. So can we do something? Maybe not. And there you have it. But the question is, of course, what are the dynamics behind it? How this warfare thing, one of the examples is, for example, if you take Napoleon and you see all the knights and these colorful people with feathers on their hairs and stuff, horses, their idea was to be as present as possible. You see this on the old films, like this massive present human beings. And then you have these ones and those ones, and then they crash into each other, the blood and the gut and the gore. And even they had colorful vests not to show the blood, because honor things. Then this World War II came, and we invented the tank. And then suddenly, even the first days of World War I were quite interesting, because soldiers still had feathers on their heads, and couldn't do anything about actually the machines that were so developed, and everything went so fast, and this whole technological development went on, and suddenly they had to go into they had to disappear in the landscape. You had to go underground. And suddenly they had to hide. This camouflage stuff is going on. And suddenly the idea was that instead of being present, they had to hide. And you can even go further and further in it until there's really no chance anymore. We think about Afghanistan and the drones. They don't see it. It comes from nowhere. It comes from somewhere else. And they didn't even see it coming. There is absolutely no chance. So this human development of erasing ourselves is, according to me, something we urge, we long for. The self-driving car. And in the same, the self-driving car, we can do it now. And the next page is, oh no, the robots take our work. Well, fucking don't invent the self-driving car, and you could drive it, and you could pollute all over the place. Then you'd have to, sorry. There's something strange about our specimen. So if you think about the electric car, beautiful invention, or maybe not. Who knows? The batteries, risky business. Maybe we have a stack of batteries that is so huge that we will drown in batteries. And then we don't know what to do. Then we have to clean them up. And that will take, I don't know what. Or I love it when people have a good driving car and then get rid of it and then throw it away, actually, and then buy a new one, an electric one. And actually by that, they will pollute so much that the electric car is just absolutely fucking nonsense. Take your old car and drive around until it's broken, and then you use it until the end. So what I want to say is that apparently it's super difficult for us to understand what we are doing. And I think artists should be like dogs with slippers to try to understand. So I will quickly go one or two little, oh, sorry, that's not this one. It's, where are we? There. I had it, these computers are so, yes. So this one, for example, it's an old piece, but one of my, so I think so this is a sensory deprivation tank. The water is 37 degrees exactly. An actor is in, or performer is inside, and he gets into a trance. The water is 37 degrees. He doesn't see, he doesn't feel, he doesn't hear anymore. And actually there you have a human being that is so surrounded by his own inventions that he is just there. There's no more feelings. There's no more nothing. We're just there being supported, living by a machine. So there he is. Then there's heart. That's one of my favorites. So heartbeat. The heartbeat is in real time. The former. Yeah. So in every 500 heartbeats, she's pulled backwards, 8 meters backwards, 4 meters high, smashes into a mattress, falls down on a mattress on the stage, gets back on stage and waits for the next 500 heartbeats. That go faster, of course, because due to the adrenaline. And then she waits, and then she waits until she goes again. By the way, it's fun to do. But I think it's a kind of position we're in. The little story. We were in Avignon with this one, and Claire was in front of audience, and there was a woman sitting very near to her because there was something. And this woman was like, finally, theater, I understand. And but she didn't see the cable. And then it's long, 500 heartbeats, 5 minutes more or less, very, very boring. And then Claire went, and this woman screamed out loud in the theater, like, no! Because she just saw somebody going. And so Claire was coming back, and then she was laughing because she was like, yes, got one. And this woman kept on laughing because she was so afraid. And then Claire had to laugh, and then the audience had to laugh, and everybody had to laugh. And in the meanwhile, this horrible machine went on. And it gave a perfect position in what we are, I think. This was Überlebenskunst. Überlebenskunst is a festival in Berlin, and it's also about ecological things. And then I was thinking, what can we do? What is it that we effectively can do? And then I thought, maybe one of the best things we can do is sleep. While we sleep, we don't do so much wrong. It's like 8 hours a day that we kind of don't use too much energy. We don't, etc., etc. It's okay. So I thought, let's put the audience to sleep. So this is a dancer. This is Mr. Stiggold, who tells how important sleep is. Alix tells about, well, it's actually one huge hypnosis session, the whole performance. And does it work? No, it's just crossing. Yeah. And we try to, well, 60% of audience does sleep after a while. It's I didn't want to make images of it, but programmers, curators don't believe when I tell them that they really are asleep, the poor human beings. And the nice thing about it is that that it was quite comforting. It was for me. This is it goes on and goes on, and people are really asleep. They're just gone. They don't. This one, I think, there's somebody even with the back to the audience, to the dancer, doesn't care anymore. And if you take Mr. Stiggold's idea, then it is really important for us, and the more we sleep and the more we take care of a healthy hygiene in sleeping, the better the decisions in our lives will be made. And so, beautiful theory. In general, I think one of the most the condition we're in, especially in Europe, is entertainment industry, where Disneyland, of course, where we don't produce anymore. We are just disappeared. We are so there's our friend. The whole idea of this performance was that he shouldn't be there. It's not his show. He just is on the wrong moment, on the wrong spot. It's not his show. So the question was also, how can we, there he is again, realizing that it is not the place. So he goes further. Yeah, he just walks around for hours. Oh yeah, this is one of the... Empathy is something very interesting because we know the human being is inside and still we laugh. Isn't that very interesting? So we thought, hey, we did this with a test audience, and we thought, why do they always laugh? Don't they know it's a horrible position this friend is in? So we thought, he wants to commit suicide, but he cannot because he's a doll. And dolls, or comic figures, or little Mickey Mouses, whatever happens with them, they cannot die. So as working poor people cannot leave their situation, this one cannot do that either. So no matter what he does, no matter how many times he hits his head against the wall, he has to get up because he cannot die. So the act of being there is also the tragedy itself. So I even put it was at one point so funny the whole time that I put microphones inside of his suit to have a slice of empathy, because otherwise it was just funny. And that wasn't even hard enough, so at one point, so he gives audience what they really need. So it goes on. Baddest music ever, and the question is, of course, what afterwards? The problem is you cannot stop. And then we decided to do the same thing again, with all the jokes and all the learned dances, and everything was just a huge setup. But of course, there's no hope is easy. And so we thought we'd do it a third time. And then after a while, we get this kind of mechanical, Lynchian nightmare environment. The thing about this is where I also about the horror, something strange comes up. The catastrophe is beautiful. The idea that we loved 9/11 as an aesthetic thing, this wow, look at it, something happens, and I think it's one of the strangest. The more I can be as hard as I can with my stuff, I get so many times, "Oh, Kris, it was so beautiful." Like, what the hell? So this is a thing I still have to figure out. How are we on time? 1 minute? Then I will end with this one. Always good. Sound is ready? Oh, sorry for the advertisements. So it's a beautiful inside firework. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Kris. Maybe you can join me, and maybe I can immediately also ask Sue and Kristof to join us, because we will compact everything together. Kristof, are you still around? Oh, yeah. So maybe I will start with Kris. So in the talk we had just before at dinner, you said there is one zone that I can't ask questions about, which was a personal.
Go for it.
Sorry?
Go.
No, actually, my question is, of course, there is your work that has a certain atmosphere, maybe a certain hopelessness in it. I was careful to say it, but okay, no, hopeless. And then there's, of course, you as a person. How does your personal view correspond with? Is it maybe first of all, is it an interesting question? And second of all, is there a discrepancy between the two?
No, no, of course not. No, it's no. As an artistic practice, I searched for I could do the comedy or the tragedy. and I chose for the tragedy in my work. So
And a comedy in your life.
of course, happy joy.
Okay. No, but this is quite an important choice to make, right? Was it a conscious choice?
Almost, yeah.
Okay.
I was a bit attempted to attracted to the dark. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But no, it's the because I even think that if you look at Mr. Lynch, David, actually there's or even worse, Romeo Castellucci.
Worse?
No, also dark.
Okay. Yes.
If I did meet Mr. Castellucci, I'm afraid not Lynch, but both of them are very gentle, nice, happy people. The thing is that it's even the energy I think you need to have the energy to try to understand, to have a dialogue with dark and etc. difficult things, and that's a lot of energy you need to. And in that sense, you have to almost feel well to dive into it and not to go down with that matter.
Oh, it's so dark.
Fuck. So no.
Yes, so you're diving. No, I understand. So there is actually, is it a cathartic thing to do? No, it doesn't have anything to do with.
No, it's a hobby. It's it's really like the dog playing with the slippers. It's just the fun of trying to understand the most darkest things.
Yes.
And then creating to do something with it. That is for me as an artist the most constructive thing you can do, and the most positive thing you can do is trying to change it, to transform it into an object or a performance or whatever it might be. And for that, that's a very positive thing to do something and to have a dialogue and to work.
A word I heard in your talk was empathy. Yes. And I think, and also, for example, you talked about Heiner Müller, and we could see these people as extremely dark, or Beckett is also a big inspiration, or maybe people who show us some empathy. Maybe we don't find the answers in the pieces, but maybe we can fill in, I don't know, a way of dealing?
A way of dealing. It's the Ballardian saying, this is somehow, in their view, what is going on. Fail once, fail more, fail better. Beckett is one of the most almost empathetic and hopeful things you can say. It's the failing is not failing. It is something you can learn from. It's a positive thing. You can evolve. Except the fail once, fail more, fail better feels a bit dark. That's very true. Yes.
Maybe back to Kristof, because actually your standpoint is talk and act. Although maybe in this acting might be futile, or is that too dark?
No, it's true, because all acts are actually very small, and I can only hope that it gets copied, so that a lot of small acts can change something. But I guess we need to be scared sometimes to act, because we're now living in a very cozy. We're all living cozy life here in Western Europe, and I think we need to be scared to dare to act, because we have got lots to lose. Maybe we need hopelessness to do something about it, because we have to dare to lose, I guess.
Isn't there a risk to make us immobile?
Yes, and we need maybe the immobilization at first. Because also in my work, I have to experience depression, and I'm not attracted to light. I'm actually more afraid of the dark. So then I run into the light. But I'm not attracted to the light. I just run away from darkness.
Yeah. So I think, do you think maybe your practices aren't so far apart then from each other in core, let's say?
No.
Maybe, yeah, that
We
was a
understand
presupposition,
each other
yeah.
very well, I guess.
No, but I do respect a lot of the ecological. There's no. I think it's just the same story we are saying. It's just that the form and the way it shows itself is completely different. But deep inside, there's just an empathetic and a huge concern about this little ball we live on. It's just the approach that is the approach and maybe the approach is the same, but the result is maybe different.
Yes. Did you all drink the potion, Sue?
Yes.
Yes. Kris, you also drank the potion?
Of course.
Oh, did anybody didn't drink the potion? 1, 2, 3 people. Oh. We are all consciously poisoned, actually, by the Anthropocene. But maybe this was also, that's what you said, we could all cozily drink, eat, not asking ourselves any questions, although we were eating poison, perhaps. And now you made us a little bit more conscious about it. So you didn't doubt before you drank?
That it would be bad for me? What do you mean about it?
Yes. Did you have any doubts before you drank the potion?
I'm yes. I'm not going to say no, but I don't really know how it will add up. And he said it wouldn't take effect till 70, so that would make me 127. I'm not planning to live, or 126. I'm not planning to live that long. No, I don't know. I think we have to take a lot. I was at a performance today that I'm sure polluted me more than that. So
What kind of a performance?
Well, this guy had firecrackers in his ears, and then he lit them on fire, and red dust went all over the room. And we all, after 10 minutes of that, we had to leave.
Okay.
I think I still smell like it. But anyway,
so actually, art is polluting and bad for your health.
it can be
basically.
easily. A lot of art can be.
Yeah.
I
Kristof?
think Kris has an interesting point of view about artists and polluting.
No, I have not. No way. No, I have this V6 engine, this beautiful machine, V6 engine Alfa Romeo, one of the best engines ever made in the 70s. It was the basics for a Ferrari. Beautiful machinery, 160 horsepower. You know, of course, you know, and it's one of the most incredible machines that are made. It's handmade. There's no computer thing going on, and it's such métier-wise. It's an incredible invention. It influenced this thing, this horror we invented, was the most powerful. I think it's one of the most powerful objects we made last century, and it had a huge influence on everything. And at one, so what I do is I put the engine on, and it goes to flames I mean, it would flames out.
Okay. Yeah.
No, well, I have other ones that explode, but not this one. And so it's very bad for the people around it because they're really polluted for 1 minute and a half. All the exhaustion stuff and I don't know what. The thing is that National Portrait Gallery asked me to show it because it was an ecological festival around. And I said, yeah, of course, let's go for it. And security-wise, we had all problems, open flames, exhaustion. We had every problem. And then after months and months of work, because people had to be in suits with gas masks on to walk around this machine that 10 million cars each day in London alone. And I couldn't put my engine on. I was shocked. There was a letter when I did it at Kai Theater, the engine. I had a letter in the Standard about somebody of Gaia saying, "You pollute." I don't even have a license to drive. He went home to Ghent with his car.
Yes.
People say to me when they see the car, "This is not in my car." You've got two, honey bun. I mean, it's so incredible. We are crazy.
Yes.
No, but I mean, sorry, on the pollution.
Yes, but I think you stroke actually the important maybe conclusion, if we can draw any conclusions of tonight, that artists unveil things, or in this context, artists unveil things that we maybe don't see, that can show us perspectives on a possible future, on a possible now. I would love to invite you all to sit down, because we are going to the last part of tonight. And I think while we are sitting down, I have two lovely assistants who will help me to put the chairs aside. Because I would love to introduce you to Innerwoud. And Innerwoud is actually Pieter Jan van Asse. And he's a Belgian one-man band. He plays the contrabass. And we talked a little bit just before tonight. And he said that a lot of his inspiration comes from nature. And we also, although he's a very happy person, his music can be quite dark. But in this darkness, and I think it relates to what Kris said also, in this darkness, there could be some kind of, I'm afraid to say hope. Yes, hope is cheap, but there is some kind of maybe how do you say it? Maybe a new start, maybe a meditation on how things could be. So in his debut album Mirre from 2015, he is described as music in which moments full of neoclassical minimalism and ethereal chamber music transfer into a world of grubby drones and ambient. So, Innerwoud, where are you? Oh, there you are. Welcome to the stage for our last performance for tonight. Pieter Jan van Assen, aka Innerwoud, with Bram Bentijn responsible for the visuals. A massive thank you to all of you, especially to our artists, Kristof Vrancken, Spaid, and Kris Verdonck, to be our dogs playing with slippers tonight. Thank you so much. It was extremely interesting. On behalf of the AZ Night partners, and also Pien Visser and Vera de Vreese, who curated this evening, Wim and Wim, who did the technicians who made it all run smoothly tonight, and also Bandencentrale de Condé from Kiewit for the tires. Good to know. Downstairs, Willem Kissenbeek and Noortje Delahaye, together with some other students of PXL Med, are operating downstairs tonight, and they developed an essay with images, and a visual essay, and you can take one with you home for free. It is inspired by tonight. There is a Riso printer at the bar, and you can form a queue, and everybody can take a little book home tonight. And while you wait, you can have a drink at the cafe. You all received, I think, a little round thing worth €2 for a drink at the bar. And also in the corner over there, Josephine van Beek was present tonight, and she will write a text based on what was said and shown tonight, and it will be on the Facebook page and also on the AZ website. So I hope you got inspired tonight, maybe immobilized, maybe there is a fire to act now. And we will be back on March the 13th. Then we will talk about a more optimistic topic, although I'm not quite sure. The artistic potential of the periphery beyond the urban. The periphery is more optimistic. Well, I hope so. Anyway, I will see you back in 3 weeks. And good to know, illustrator Riede Verknokke will be back. I know there are some fans. Also, we have a really interesting guests. Stefan Peterman of Architectural Office OMA of Rem Koolhaas, visual artist Gert Robijns and Katrien Beum from the UK will be with us. And we will also start with an interesting opening film, a collaboration between Marieke van Wuitswinkel and Dennis Segers. So thank you very much for tonight, and with all your questions, see you at the bar. Thank you.